Hello, welcome to the channel. So today I'm gonna talk. I want to talk about the life lessons that I learned from traveling because I'm not a big traveler. I don't particularly enjoy getting out of bed at all, to be honest. But of course, when incident such as your mom dying or being dead kind of kicked you out of your comfort zone usually, and that's what happened to me about 11 years, no, 13 years ago, a long, long time ago, which I still live the consequences of now, even 13 years later. But one of the reason why I decided to travel after that incident was also because my domestic life was also suddenly interrupted from living by myself to suddenly having about two different families living with me at that time. So I was just so crowded and I wasn't like thinking right, and so I just tried to escape. So I decided to go to Europe for 3 weeks, and then I came back for 3 weeks, and then I went back for 3 weeks. One of the things that I learned from that lesson is first, after about 6 weeks, traveling becomes a bit repetitive. But the first lesson is traveling makes you stop overthinking things, meaning, like, even now, like when I see people traveling on TikTok, right? Like they go to Japan, they go to China, and all that exotic countries. I know, like, I'm Asian, but for me, like, because I can't read the characters, it makes it a bit anxious. Like when I think about traveling to a place that I can't read the characters of. I guess it's the same if I have to go to Arab countries, for example, or Thai or Turkey, places where it's not Roman alphabets, but that didn't happen to me. Like I went to Europe, so everything is in the Roman alphabet, so that's fine. Um, but like the experience really taught me just to focus on the moment and really just focus on getting from A to B, from wherever you are to wherever that you need to go right now. And I feel like traveling really makes, at least me, focus on the present moment, and it makes me not think about my problems, or that, of course, like I still have my problems. I was still depressed, I was still grieving heavily, I was just not in my right mind, of course. That's all of that as well. But even when I was basically so dissociated, in that current form of heavily dissociated, I still manage to come home at the end of each trip. So I guess there's some sort of system to make sure that I am safe, for each leg of the trip. And I was going with a South Korean, like for the second leg of my trip, I was going with a South Korean uh, girl, basically. And she wasn't like any of the wiser. Like we weren't like we were an avid, an expert traveler. And I think I feel like it's almost the same with life. I feel like I have this big idea of how hard like challenges in life is, but all you have to do is just getting from A to B. You just have to focus on just getting to your next destination, and that's it. And that's like just being really simple about it, because you don't really know whether, if you planning about 4 steps ahead, whether the third step is going to eventuate or not, because something might happen after you finish your second step, like that is so out of the ordinary, that you have to shuffle your whole life around so that you can adjust to it. So it's always about what's the next destination is, and getting from the airport to the accommodation, and after that you can plan ahead about where you want to go, what you want to do. So there is a routine about it as well, a rhythm. There's a discipline about like doing the same thing, which is like booking the flight, getting to the airport, getting to the accommodation. Then you have like freedom to choose what you want to do. And The best thing about traveling is that every day feels different, and once it starts to become the same, you can pick up yourself and go to a different place and do that over and over again. But after a while, of course, I just felt as if that, yeah, of course we're in a different place, but we're still doing the same thing, which is like we're trying to kind of navigate the city. We're trying to figure out how to get from one A to B. Of course, I was still fearful with a lot of stuff as well, but things was okay. Like, you realize like people are just people everywhere. Of course, there's always going to be scary bits here and there, but people are just people, and people are just trying to live their lives. And I was lucky because a lot of the times when I was there, a lot of people was just really helpful. I remember being in also, this is probably an important lesson for me for that particular trip, which was like there's always people going to help you. I'm not sure whether it's the truth now 13 years later in life or not, because I don't feel it. But when I was on the trip, when I was traveling, it was definitely true because it felt like I wasn't alone, even though I was alone. Like I was standing in front of this art gallery one day in the entrance, and then I'm just like staring blankly to the ceiling. I wasn't confused or I wasn't lost or anything. I was just standing there because there is a snowstorm outside. But of course, I'm Asian, and this was, I don't know, where was this? Finland or something? Maybe. I think Helsinki, yeah, Finland. And this lady was so nervous, and then I realized that she was so nervous because she wanted to talk to me, and she wanted to talk to us, like me and this friend that I was going traveling with. And she was like, do you need help? I can help you, with the most genuine feeling ever. I'm like, of course, like not all the experiences is the same. I remember when we were in Germany or Austria, and we were on the train, and then we have to deal with this older man who basically just looked at us as if that we were a pest, that we were so annoying. And of course, you meet these kind of people as well. Those people are always going to be everywhere, wherever you go in life, to be honest. But I was so shocked about how many people that were actually very helpful. And of course, given the fact that we were Asian, so we look very different than, their blonde eye and white complexions, like completely Western in Europe over there. And because Europe is so completely different than the UK. The UK is just a different place altogether. I was only in the UK for one day, and I had enough. I was like, I don't like this place. Well, I was in London, but that was enough. I'm like, oh, I was here for one day. I'll have enough. Um, Europe is completely different. And yeah, the lesson was, so just stay present and to focus on the next destination. Don't over focus on what happens after that destination is done. What happens after that? Just focus on the next one, and just have one goal in mind, basically, and one destination. Even though you are part of an itinerary, like travel makes me feel like just focus on the present moment a lot more and not overthink things and not overplan things. And I don't know, for some reason, even when I got lost, even when I did not know where I was going, for some reason, things just work out. Things just work out. And it wasn't like it took us 3 days of being stranded or anything. Like, I remember one time I was in Bilbao, and my travel buddy basically made a mistake of thinking like we were going at 10 a.m., but apparently the bus that we needed to go from Bilbao to Barcelona actually leaves at 10 p.m. So we have about like 12 hours um, to kill before we get to our bus. So we had to go back to town and just spend our days in a cafe. She was just watching YouTube back then, and I wasn't onto YouTube in 2012 back then, but she was basically just watching YouTube all the time. It was so amazing to watch. Basically, that's what I'm doing now, but she was already doing it back then. She was like 4 years younger than me, and we didn't really we didn't really talk much. There was not a lot of communications. I can't say that we don't get along. It's just that we don't even talk, so that it's impossible for us to fight because there was no talking. It was a very strange thing. We didn't contact each other after we split up after the trip. We were just there, so we were just like companion. It was just like two individuals traveling together side by side. It wasn't like we form a friendship by the end of like 6 weeks together, which is strange, of course. Usually people form some sort of allegiance or some sort of bond after 6 weeks together, like spending so much time together. We didn't. I guess that was like one of the lessons too. I mean, if I can put up spending 24/7 with someone that we don't particularly like about each other, I probably will be okay if I spend 24/7 with someone that I would like a spouse, for example, someone I love. That probably would be a better experience. But also, I realized like the lessons is that I didn't have much fun. I was kind of like going through one destination to another based on, I don't know, maybe just an ego thing. Like I just needed to be out of the house. So I'm in Europe and I'm just ticking each city. And the weather is highly dependent whether the weather is good or not. So whether you can go out or not, those also was really depending on that. But I didn't. I guess like I wasn't adventurous enough when I was traveling, and I think you need to be more adventurous when you're traveling, and I think that also applies in life. You need to be more adventurous. You can't just play it safe all the time, which I feel I did back then, which I shouldn't have, because I felt like when I was in Sweden, or not Sweden, somewhere, yeah, I think Sweden, Norway. We were in Sweden, but we were planning in Norway. And I remember like there was talk about getting a tour to see the aurora, and I didn't do it, which I feel like I should have. But of course, like to be honest, if I really wanted to see the aurora, I don't have to go all the way to Scandinavian country. I can just go down to Tasmania and see it, or to just fly for 3 hours down to New Zealand. It's probably better scenery anyway with all the mountains and stuff. So yeah, so it's not that about like I'm missing out on the aurora, that is once in a lifetime opportunity. It's not really, because I can just fly to New Zealand and say the aurora australis rather than aurora borealis, which borealis is the one in the Scandinavian, like in the northern hemisphere, while australis is the one in the southern hemisphere. It's still the same. It's like just aurora. um so it's not the aurora itself, but I think it was just more, rather than living life, or in this particular example traveling so that far in in the globe, and you don't even try to get out of your way to try something so um out of ordinary, like out of real life. Maybe my brain was just too damaged and too traumatized back then that it wasn't able to live or experience pleasure. I think that's it, right? I think I wasn't able to feel pleasure, even these days. Like feeling pleasure comes really rarely, but I am starting to feel it somehow. Like there was moment about 2 years ago. I feel like, is it bad that it was 2 years ago? I remember this specific moment, and it was just an ordinary event where I was just in front of the traffic light, just waiting for the light to go green so I can cross the street. And I was going with my flatmate by the time, and was just doing grocery. And I looked to my left, and it was sunset. The sunset was so pretty. It was pink. It was beautiful, and I could feel like my whole body was having like a tingling moment, and it was like as if the hair at the back of my head was um, standing up as well. It was just like a full blown bodily experience of just experiencing beauty of nature, and it was just a split second. It was just like maybe like 10 seconds at most, and it was 2 years ago, and I still remember it very vividly now. But at least like this moment exists while before it didn't. And I know like it's 2 years ago. Oh my god, like how like it's so far in between. And I'm like, yeah, it is. Um, the lessons from traveling is definitely that. And I think it matters more if you do outside your ordinary life. It's like if your ordinary life is very close, it's very, you don't talk to people much. Maybe traveling, you start to talk to people and you realize like maybe you should need to open up more in your daily life too. I feel like it's a waste of traveling if you do what you do in your daily life. But it was really hard to break that habit of like that being you, and suddenly you understand that saying that says wherever you go there you are. It's like you can't run from your problem, you can't escape from your problem, because you will always have your problem with you. Wherever you run to, you always have you. I think, yeah, I think that's one of the thing about traveling, which was, and you also get into the rhythm of not stopping, and every day becomes different, but it's also the same because you have to keep on going. So if something bad happens in that particular day or in that particular city, like, okay, well, it's just one day, well, it's just one city, we're going to go to a different place tomorrow anyway. It kind of gives you that meaning of like every day is a brand new day. Like you don't have to put up with yesterday's bullshit, for example. And that's really really true when you're traveling, and I think that's part of the reason why people travel. And I know, like, when you're traveling, you always have like a travel day. So that day is just specifically to get you from one place to another, from one city to another. And because sometimes it takes 6 hours, sometimes it's like 2 days, sometimes I don't know. It depends where you go. But I don't think I can be one of those people who are so adventurous. Some people get be on a train, on a sleeper train for like 2 days, for example, to get to the furthest north city of a certain country, maybe to, like, how some people go to Yakut, Siberia, like minus 50 Celsius degrees. It's like they put all their stock outside because outside is colder than the fridge, that kind of thing. I think that happens once in Helsinki, where the fridge is basically warmer than outside. So we started to put our drinks on the window so that it gets colder. It gets cold and we can drink like ice thing. Because like inside is quite insulated, it's quite warm. So if you put it outside on like wedge between the window and the whatever it is, like the railing outside, it's basically outside, but you can still reach it, and it will get semi frozen because outside is colder than the fridge inside. And well, I don't know about now, but back then, even back then, with very limited connectivity when it comes to the internet and everything, like we had Wi-Fi and everything, just in case, like some of you who are only like 23, for example, figure out like I was 10 by that time. I don't know how the world operates back then. Well, we had internet, Instagram just starting. I basically uploaded all my photos. I used Instagram filter throughout my journey and uploaded it to Instagram. I think back then I also had that vision of like I'll travel and I'll make content, but I didn't really know how to sell things online, so I wasn't successful. I have the content though. I still post it every now and then. It's still fresh in my mind to some degrees. And I think this is specifically to Europe, because I don't think Europe is probably too out of the box destination guide, because it's already an established system. So their system infrastructure is pretty tidy. It's not confusing at all. You can see like it's easy to go from the airport to the city center. I think it's probably much more challenging to travel where the infrastructure is not too tidy yet, it's not too organized yet. But I think now, if I wanted to go to China, for example, it probably will be at the same par as Europe back then. It's probably very organized and very structured. But I don't know. I feel like traveling, the life lessons that I get from traveling is people already have, no, not people, but system already exist. Sometimes you just have to operate the system. You just have to be there. You just have to get your body somewhere, and then you have to just assimilate with the system. I think like it's harder if you have to go and interact with people outside the cities because they're not accustomed to deal with foreigners. I think that applies in real life too. Like if you deal with people that haven't really dealt with people outside their own community, it's quite hard to deal with them. And then you have to remember that maybe they didn't have any experience of dealing with people outside their community, even though they live in Sydney, for example. And you have to put that into perspective. You have to consider them as foreign, or you yourself as foreign, and treat the exchange that way, kindly but also informatively. You can't assume that they know stuff about you, or they or you know stuff about them that cannot be given. Like there's a lot of assumption that cannot be like there's a lot of assumption that cannot just be laid out as if that it is true. You have to assume that no one knows anything and treat it that way. Also, like I think one of the things that I picked up when I was traveling is that treat people the way they treat you is very important. At that, like before, I think I was really concerned, like if I'm being rude to someone. But I remember when I was in Italy, everyone was talking to me really rudely. I don't think it was rude. I think it's just the way they talk. Maybe I was wrong. But after the first or the second time, I just started talking the same way, like direct and just abrupt and loud. I remember like just going into shops and we just want to choose like some jewelry as souvenirs, and they would just be very overbearing and just like, no, you should choose this. This is good. This is bad. And I'm like, no, I want that one, this one, and follow that one. So I just started to just copy and imitate the way they talk. And there was no row, there was no fighting involved. At the end of the day, it was just simple. Like after I make a decision, I just paid for it and I walked away. Like no one looked as if that they were angry or anything, despite the really angry tones being exchanged throughout the interaction. So I realized like, oh, maybe some people they only understand communication that way. So you just need to mirror the way they communicate, and you will be fine. And I think in life it's also like that. If someone like start yelling at you, just start yelling back, and probably that's the decibel of sound that they are accustomed to. So if you're not talking at them at that sound level, they maybe think you are rude. So yeah, I'll just take that as like not taking things personally. I also take like there is a some certain of feeling of boredom attached to everywhere we go. There's also this capitalistic undertone that kind of shared, especially in like in Europe anyway. So I'm only speaking in Europe and only in a specific time of, the end of 2012. I remember like being in Budapest and going to the central market. So if you don't know where the central market is, I think it's just near the Green Bridge in Budapest. I think it's in the Buddha side, if I'm not sure, because apparently Budapest is like it's two sides on the river. I forgot the name of the river, but like the one side is Buddha, the other side is Pesh. So it's like Buddha and Pesh. So which side you are on? And I forgot which side. Anyway, so yeah, we went to the central market, and my mind was like thinking this just looks like Paddy's Market in Sydney. There is a Paddy's Market where people just go in for souvenir shopping. It used to be very popular back in 2000s, like 20 years ago, but now it's very different. It just looks very sparse. It's not as attractive as it was before. Um, but it just looked pretty much the same. It's just like a tourist trap, and everyone there just look like they're locals. And I just feel like, oh, markets everywhere around the world is the same, huh? I'm like, oh, it's weird. Like we are in Europe, and it's like the central market is basically in this really beautiful architecture type of building. It looks like, architecture in central Sydney's train station, very grand. There is like this huge um, window. Basically, it really just looked like a grand central station, but they're being used as a market. So maybe it used to be a train station. I don't know. But yeah, it's just like stuff like that where you think, oh, everywhere is just the same. Now, one thing that I was really curious about though, like I didn't find any kettle when I was traveling Europe until I was in Munich, I think. That was just a trivia that I had. But yeah, so that's my stories from my travel journeys and what I learned from it, and how can I apply that to real life and stuff, the lessons that I carried with me. Well, like, yeah, focus on the present moment, just focus on the next destination. There's always people that help you out, and there is some sort of similarities wherever you go anyway. So even though you're in a foreign area, people are people at the end of the day, so you can always count on that. They're good people, they're bad people. Wherever you go, you're always part of the system, so you just have to look for the system and learn it as fast as possible. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening to me, guys. I appreciate it. I will talk to you in the next video. And yeah, my name is Valerie. I'm a digital creator. I'm a solopreneur. If you want to check out my other works on the internet, go to the description box below and check out all my links. And I will see you later. Bye, everyone.